All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another off-street webinar. Today's topic is using AI to improve daily parking operations with a deep look at how UTA's team has adopted ChatGPT for internal operations. We are super duper excited to have you all here with us. We're just going to give it, as usual, a few seconds for people to get settled and join in. So, in the meantime, drop in the chat where you're joining from today. I am personally once again located here in Regina, Saskatchewan at the Off Street headquarters. And yes, as usual, it is snowing again. Before we kick things off and get into kind of the real content, I'll start by introducing myself. If you haven't seen me on here before, my name is Kyle and I'm a marketing specialist here on the Off Street team. Super excited to be here with you all today, as well as our special guest who I'm about to introduce soon. But if you do have any questions that come up throughout the session today, drop those in the chat or in the Q&A section below. We definitely encourage it. We want to hear all your burning questions and all your comments. So definitely do that. Now it's time for me to introduce our special guests, our man of the hour, although it is only a half hour. But everybody, please hype them up in the chat. Today we have joining us Dr. Greg Hladik, aka Dr. Greg. He has a PhD in educational leadership and policy. He has been at UTA for 17 years with multiple roles in higher ed, everything from residence life to real estate to mobility and even bookstores. He's a small business owner, a swim school. And believe it or not, if you thought he didn't have enough time on his hands, he also has 4 kids. So thank you, Greg, for joining us today. You sound like a man with not a lot of time on your hands, but thank you so much for having some time to spend it with us today.
And what a great day to be here and a fun topic. And so I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Okay. So first things first, what I'll do is I'll kind of set the scene with a quick rundown of the topics that will kind of be covered in today's webinar. Obviously, everyone here's read the title, but let me give you a little bit of a brief. So as everyone should know, AI is making waves across every industry. I mean, we've probably all heard it, and parking is no exception. So it's not going away. It's here to stay, and we might as well start to use it to our advantage if you haven't already. While parking operations have relied on data and efficiency for a super long time, artificial intelligence, or AI, is now opening up new possibilities for smarter decision making, simplified workflows, and enhanced customer experiences. All of those sound super important. So, today we're diving into how the University of Texas at Arlington, UTA, is leading the way in AI driven parking management. From custom built AI assistants to those data driven insights, UTA's team has been exploring innovative ways to make parking operations more efficient and more effective. So we're going to drop our little Zoom wizard here in the background is going to drop a poll because we want to know kind of where everyone that is joining us from is at in their AI journey. So the poll should pop up on your screen. Where are you at in your AI journey? Have you explored, you maybe haven't explored this yet. Maybe it's in the early stages. Maybe you're actively using it in a small way, or it's even a key part of your operations. Let us know. Or even feel free to drop in the chat, whatever you'll feel comfortable with. But maybe I'll turn the questions over to you, Greg, now and dive into this. So I want to know, Greg, what initially inspired you and your team to explore AI within UTA's parking operations?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that AI is going to change the world, and it probably has more so today than what even we recognize. But we're fortunate to be at the university here where there's 4 things that have gone really well for us. First off, we have a foundation from the university that not only allows us, but expects us to be innovative and to use AI in what we do, especially as we prepare students to live and work and play in the post-college world. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is that we needed at a department level, we have had so many things that have come up that need us to be creative, to provide innovative solutions, and allow us to work smart and hard. And so we had the opportunity at the department level to implement some of these AI tools. The third thing I think that's important to know is that I'm a naturally curious learner and I look for constraints in the business and I solve those. And so most times I do that with technology or with process improvements. And so that's naturally how I'm wired. And then the fourth thing is that our team was ready for these changes. They were ready to implement some of the tools to improve our services and to reduce the workload. And so we had all four of those things happening at the same time. The strategic guidance from the university, the support from our administration, opportunity, and then skills and a desire. So the next thing was just naturally to take the step forward and get started and play around. And that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, I think that get shit done culture is like super important. I've been fortunate enough to, um, be a part of that in my roles that I've been in so far. And I think it's like it plays a huge part in, trying out those new things like AI. So that's awesome to hear.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so number two here, I got another question. Can you tell us more about the custom GPT that you've developed? I may or may not have heard that it's called What Would Greg Say? So how does that work, and what is the impact, or what impact has that had on your team's kind of day-to-day workflows?
Yeah, it's kind of funny happenstance on how it happened, but what's the one thing that we all need more of but don't have enough of, and that's time, right? And so we're always pulled in multiple different directions, and we always have these things that are waiting in front of us. So how can you replicate yourself? How can you replicate yourself, provide access to others without actually being there? And that's the idea behind the What Would Greg Say? But it actually started as a joke between my colleagues, where when somebody hands me, like, let's say a marketing thing, to say, hey, can you review this and see how we can spruce it up or improve it or proof it. Uh, my team has learned to do that with caution, because I take that very seriously, and I mark it up, and with my suggestions. And so one of my colleagues said, "Hey, you should really create one of these GPTs that just came out for this, and we can upload everything to it, and it'll be just like you were here, but you're not." And so I said, "Oh, it's a pretty good idea." And so in a matter of a couple minutes, I was able to train a GPT inside of ChatGPT to think like I do, which is pretty simple. Let's be simple. Think like I do, respond like I would, look at the situation through a customer service or a student affairs perspective. It's trained a little bit on our department, on some of the features or the apps or the resources that we have. So it will recommend some of those are inserted into the document, and we talk about those. So it was easy to create, and then it was just about sharing it with some of our team, and we did it just as kind of a playful thing. But I actually use it myself sometimes whenever I get something to say. What would I say in this situation? And it's pretty remarkable. But we've made several GPTs. They're easy to do, especially for things that are going to be repetitive. If you're going to be doing something 10 times in the next 10 months, create it one time, and then you have this technology that will help get you closer to the end result much quicker. So I use it for things like my LinkedIn post, of knowing my tone and what I'm all about on LinkedIn and my profile on LinkedIn, construction projects, knowing all the details about a construction project, so we can throw something in and it spits out details that way. We think about it in terms of marketing, sales, administrative work, operation. I mean, there's so many things that you can tailor each one of these to. But I think at the end of the day, these GPTs, I think it would be so cool if I could create my own GPT that has my knowledge around it, and then I send that to a meeting and it represents me without me having to be there. And then
Yeah,
Kyle, you can send yours to the meeting as well. And so in this futuristic world, it might sound crazy, but we might have these AI agents that are doing a specific task or job that that can be done in the background or with support from a real person that can really help us eliminate some of our workload. So it's a crazy idea. It's kind of fun to play with.
totally. I saw Matt dropped in the chat. The ChatGPT equals an excellent brainstorming partner. I'd also say a lot of people, some of my friends have been even just talking to ChatGPT with like text messages and stuff like that to talk through like, okay, what should I respond with? Things like that. It's funny, you can use it in so many different ways, and creating like another version of yourself so it saves you time is a huge step.
Oh yeah, I have it on my phone, and so on my drives home, I turn on voice mode, and I
Mm,
have a conversation with it in real time, and it's just such an interesting way to develop something. That way, when I'm at a computer, I can, pull it off of there and do whatever with. But
yeah,
it's the sounding board. I mean, I think it's also really helpful to help you recognize your biases by
yeah,
representing a counter argument to what you're wanting to argue. And so it's just one of those playful tools.
totally. Okay, now getting into kind of the nitty-gritty here, if that's okay. My next question is kind of how are you leveraging AI for report analytics? Are there any kind of things that you may have learned that influence your strategy?
Yeah, I think the first thing that you have to recognize if you're going to use AI tools that are available off the shelf like ChatGPT is that you have to understand that they're not always going to be perfect. They're not always going to be 100% accurate, and you have to be okay with that. I mean, there are tools that can be 100% accurate. We don't use those because that's not what we're trying to accomplish. So if you need perfection, you have to find that source. We are just looking at it from an insight perspective. And so I'll give you a great example. We get about 1,000 parking appeals a month. And the question is, what are people saying? What are they arguing on why they shouldn't get a parking ticket? And we probably know some of this anecdotally, but unless you're that one person or two people who are handling appeals and you're looking at these one by one and tracking, it's really hard sometimes to decipher the narrative in a comment. So we took some of that data, we eliminated all the confidential personal data from it, we uploaded it into ChatGPT, and we said, tell us broadly, what are people talking about whenever they appeal? Are they talking about, um, you know, not knowing that they needed to do something? Are they saying that systems are broken and things aren't working? The parking meter is broken at a certain location. Are they saying the signage is not clear in certain areas? And so it very quickly analyzed thousands and thousands of rows of data and said, here are some very broad themes. You might want to look at these. And so we did, and we were able to very quickly find a lot of hidden messages in what people were telling us, but they were telling us independently, and we couldn't aggregate it all in a big picture. And so that was really useful. But then we also took our rules and regulations and we threw it into the same chat, and we said, all right, here's what our rules are. Here's what we're communicating to the campus community. How can we improve this? How can we make it to where people better understand what we're trying to accomplish? And so it had some really meaningful suggestions on how we can improve our rules and regulations, improve our clarity, improve our signage locations that's in certain areas. I mean, it was quite remarkable. And for us to be able to have done that without having this type of assistance, it would have taken hours and hours of resources and personnel. And let's be real, many of us working in parking just don't have that type of time or energy or desire in some situations. Yeah. So it's been really helpful. And another thing that we've done is, our buses are circulating campus and reporting on buses. We always get when buses arrive and depart at certain times, but it's not always clear when buses are missing their departure times or missing there's not a bus on route. And so for us, we were able to take, again, thousands and thousands of rows of data and say, tell us what we're missing here. Show us what areas we need to focus on. And that really helped us identify gaps in service that we probably could have done it in other ways, but it was just another tool and another opportunity for us to play around and understand what's happening when we look at a ton of data, what's happening on a small scale.
Mhm.
So
I have,
for us, I think we use the tool really just to help us focus our attention in certain areas, and then whenever we whenever we see something that's really interesting, then we actually dive deeper into the actual data to get more realistic information.
Mhm. Absolutely. I have a little follow-up question for that, but I saw there was a question from Troy here in the chat. Um, he's wondering, are you using AI to respond to appeals?
Ironically, this morning, so no, not yet. But we are working towards helping us respond better with more empathy and sympathy, saying no without saying no, helping our appeals clerks, again, find the easy ones and send those out, and then focus on the ones that are more challenging. And then I think the other opportunity with appeals that we're looking at is how can we create a process for the appellant so that not only do they know what they need to do and what they need to say in order to have their citation reduced, but it also helps your clerk say, yep, they have this, they have this, they have this. The evidence is here, the evidence is here, the evidence is here, send it on. So it's a way to improve the process and help the appealant provide a better quality appeal so that we're not having to guess or to go back and forth. And so that's what we're looking at, and that's probably one of the things that's going to come in the future.
Right. And then for someone that's not using ChatGPT all the time, how are you uploading this mass amount of data? Like how are you putting that into that?
Yeah, so it's a good point. There are several versions of ChatGPT, and depending on which version you have, it'll give you an opportunity to upload files. And then there's different models. So think about like an iPhone 11, iPhone 12, whatever they are. Maybe the iPhone 16 has an option to upload a document, but the iPhone 11 version doesn't. So that's the same concept with ChatGPT. We have the ChatGPT Teams version. So we actually don't share our data with the learning model itself. We keep everything internal with us. But depending on what you're willing to pay for, it'll give you options in the chat message to upload a file, just very similar to what people are doing in the chat here. I mean, you can probably attach an attachment here, and it's the same concept.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Don't worry, we'll definitely be getting to any questions that come up in the chat. We'll just have to do that later on, but definitely still keep dropping those. But for my next question for you, what challenges did you face when integrating AI into your operations? And, with those challenges, how did you kind of overcome those?
Yeah. So again, the foundation was already laid for us, and the expectation was that we need to be moving in this direction. But the biggest issue that we came across was the security and the privacy piece, right? That was front of the mind. And so we had to create a system to not share personal information. And our OIT, our Office of Information Technology, they have vetted ChatGPT along with Azure's version of learning model, and said, yeah, it has some settings that will prevent the chat from the data from going to the learning model. So we will support you using this in your operation. So that's what we did. But even though our data is not going to the learning model, we still are very cautious, and we created ground rules about what kind of data we're going to enter into ChatGPT in our Teams chat, just so that we're extra precautious about not sharing the data and breaking any confidentiality that we have. I think that the second piece of these things is, your output on these chats are going to only be as good as your input and your prompts that you're asking it and training it on. And so it takes a while to get that right. And you have to train the model on what it's looking at, how you want it to think, how you want it to approach a situation, the tone that you want it to output the message in. Do you want it to be witty and humorous and long-winded, or do you want it to be short and succinct and ready for an executive to review? So you have to do that, but the prompt management piece of actually getting it right and getting it to output what you want was really challenging, and we still work through that. I think another challenge is training our team. I think for most of what we do, it's great to prepare people ahead of time, but if you don't have an actual need or purpose for using ChatGPT on a regular basis, then it's hard to be trained on it and know how you can use it in your daily role. And so that was a challenge for us, and we're still working through that. We're still working on training our team. Just to give context, we probably have a handful of people in our office currently that are using this on a regular basis. The rest of our team have not come on board or have not had the opportunity or the need to be able to use these tools, but we do make it available for our team if they do want it. And then I think the last thing that's a challenge is that this is constantly changing, constantly changing. It's constantly improving. And so staying up to date is always a challenge. And so my recommendation is just don't get overwhelmed by all the new things that are coming out. It's cool to kind of pay attention and keep your thumb on the pulse, but I think it's an unrealistic expectation to say I'm going to always know what's going on in this space, because every day there's something new that comes out every day.
Yeah, you say that and it reminds me of like the new updates on my iPhone. Every now and then I'm like, I'll actually look at the update on one of them, but most times I'm just like, just download the update tonight when I'm sleeping.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
yeah, nobody really knows what's really updating unless it changes everything completely around, but that just happens. Okay, now before I get into the next set of questions for you, I'm gonna ask kind of the audience or the chat a question to drop those in the chat. So please drop your answers in the chat so we can all see them. I want to know, to everybody watching, what is your biggest headache or problem you hope that AI can help solve in your work life? Is that reading reports? Is that generating reports? Anything? What do you think AI could solve for you in your work life? If you drop those in the chat, Greg or myself can, chat about those now, or maybe we can get into them later. Matt, I see, says second
Yeah,
set buys and to help review pitches.
yeah. I use it for pitches for my swim school all the time.
Yeah. Ian Morrison, complex Excel formulas. Ooh, these are going fast. Okay, I'm trying to, okay, hoping it can help adjust shuttle routes based on demand, Alan said. That's an interesting one. Reports for sure from John Stewart. Any of these stick out to you?
For the clarity and signage, I actually ask it to create the sign for me as a starting point,
Oh,
and it creates an image of what the sign could look like, and
okay.
it's also a really cool way of doing it.
Yeah, I have noticed that ChatGPT does have that ability now to create images for you. Some of them, some of them are interesting, but some can definitely be very helpful.
Yeah.
We have a funny, uh, some of us have a funny rule in our team that if we do ask for it to generate a picture, we have to use the first try, just for like internal presentations. So it ends up being quite funny. Answering emails, I see. Complex SQL queries and reports. Wow, you guys got a lot of ideas of how this can help solve you. Some of them might even have solutions out there. I would encourage you to check those out. I mean, I obviously don't know all of them right now, but there's definitely some ways. Love to see that. Okay, now let's get into kind of next steps for you, Greg. For other parking teams looking to explore AI, what would be your top piece of advice to get started?
I think you just have to get into it. You have to try. And I think if you surround yourself with other people who are in the space and build your network and your community around others that are also playing with this, that are maybe even further ahead of you, I think that's going to be helpful. I'm a firm believer that you're going to behave in the environment that you work and you play in. And so surrounding yourself with others is, I think, a really valuable tip and tool for this particular space. I think with AI, it's so new. I think your mindset around AI has to be part leader because there's not a whole lot of people who are doing this yet. And you have to also be part entrepreneur of how could this work for me? Like all the examples in the chat, I think are a great example of how if you had, 2 or 3 hours, you could solve those problems with ChatGPT and other AI tools, but you have to think about that process, kind of like an entrepreneur, because nobody has done that yet, or at least nobody has given that to you. So I think that's really important. I think you also have to be willing to go where no one else wants to go and not being afraid of doing hard things. I think we can all do hard things if we want to, but you have to have that desire, and you can't be afraid of that. And then I think the final piece of advice that I would have is that I think with the AI tools, there's been an explosion of AI companies out there for everything. I recently gave a presentation where I showed my headshots of you upload 10 photos and then it gives you a 200 professional headshots. But those companies are going to come and go. And so I think you have to be somewhat AI agnostic so that when those companies go, you can very easily pivot to the next one.
Totally. Yeah, I think adaptability is huge when it comes to that. I know that I find myself using different solutions or different AI tools when it comes to the work that I do, and it's helpful to be kind of more, it helps you be aware, but it's also just helpful to be well versed, essentially.
Yeah, and I think we're all going to have a tech stack of AI tools that we're going to use for different things. It might be, I use Midjourney for image creation, and I use Claude and Perplexity for certain things. I use ChatGPT for certain things.
Yeah.
So I think it's really going to depend on what you're trying to accomplish, and then just have, you have a ton of tools available and picking some that work for you.
Definitely. Definitely. Okay, my last question for you is, what is next for UTA's parking team when it comes to AI? Are there any emerging trends or tech that you're excited to explore?
Yeah, there's so many things. Like I said, to start this off, I think AI is going to change the world, and it's going to change how we do everything that we do, for the better, not the worse. So I think we're going to continue to focus on AI tools that can help reduce the workload and help us improve our service levels and our staff satisfaction. I think those are easy lifts for us to focus on. We're going to encourage vendors like Auxillery and our other vendors to incorporate AI tools into the products that you sell us to help operators. Because I don't think that it's necessarily our role to take the data that's already in your system and throw it into a different system to analyze it. I think you can also integrate some of those AI tools to help us, and then it becomes a sales pitch for it as well, right? I mentioned earlier AI agents. I think they are really going to explode here, and maybe there's going to be a marketplace where you can go shop around for. I need a marketing person who can design this sign, or I need a data analytics person who can analyze this data. So I think we might have AI agents that help us with appeals. I think that we'll have some that help with marketing. I think it's also going to help us focus on the things that are important and help us understand that all the mundane things that are happening in the background are happening okay. And then I may start a podcast. I was playing around with Google LM, and I took our parking rules and regulations, probably one of the dullest topics that you can imagine, and I threw it into Google LM to create a podcast about our parking rules that we can then share out to the campus community. That it really illustrates, some of our unique rules and how people can take advantage of different permit options for students. And I made one for faculty and I made one for students. And they're really great 10-minute, 15-minute podcast that, between two people. So if you haven't played with that, I think that's a really cool thing to mess with as well. But I think there's two other things that are really important for the future of AI. One of them is that the AI that we use today is the dumbest version and the worst AI that we're ever going to use. And I think that's quite remarkable. And then the second piece is that we have to be sure that we bring our team along on this journey so that no one gets left behind.
Absolutely. I think all really great notes. It was funny. I was thinking of a next step for me when it comes to AI, based on one of your comments you made earlier about, creating a version of yourself. I'm gonna maybe just start creating versions of my team so I can send them all the questions I have before I actually ask them, so I don't ask stupid questions. But we'll see if I can do that. But it sounds like fun, talking to little digital versions of everyone on the team.
Right.
Okay, thank you so much. Really great notes on that. Now we're gonna switch over to kind of the burning questions from our attendees. I see lots of action and funnies going on in the chat, which I love to see. But let's get into those questions. Um, if we run out of time to answer all of them here, I know obviously we're quite short on time here, but if you guys want to stick around, ask questions, we'll be here to answer them. If we do really run out of time, then we'll make sure we follow up post webinar here, and we'll shoot you an answer or just set up a meeting or whatever. But I see a question that came in um, from Alan DeFord from University of Houston. He's wondering, have you used AI to help design shuttle routes?
Hi, Alan. We have not. I've tried to kind of throw our campus map into it and say, what would you change? But I haven't had any luck. And so I think it again goes back to the prompt management piece of I just haven't quite mastered the prompt. And I don't really have a need for that particularly for us. So unfortunately, no.
Right. Um, okay. If a parking team could only automate one thing to start, what would you recommend and why?
Um, so you're asking about automation, and I think that's slightly different and probably a little bit more advanced than kind of just how we're currently using it. But I think about like what's your number one thing that you do every day? Like for us, like typos in a license plate are our number one thing, or changing out someone's license plate and giving them the same message over and over again. So I think we would want to automate some of that so that perhaps you chat with a bot and it does it for you and it integrates in with your parking database provider and it makes those changes on your behalf. And I think there's tools like Zapier and Make.com that can do those things for you if you have somebody who has the resources and the expertise to be able to set those up.
So, okay, I see a fun question here in the chat from Levi. What AI feature would you want your current parking software provider to add to their tool?
I think it's one that is kind of an early warning system. Like we have so much as operators going on, and it's so hard to recognize ahead of time when something's not working. And so if there was a tool that could be an early warning system that says, like for our parking sensors, for instance, I talk about this a lot with our vendor. Like if we're not getting sensor data from a sensor regularly, as we would expect, then it should notify us that, hey, something might be wrong with this sensor. Go check it out. So those types of things I think will really help us focus on the things that matter and the things that are not or not as important, or the things that are working properly. They happen in the background without any issue.
Okay. Another one here for appeals. Is that for the appeals part that you're talking about? Is that a live integration into ChatGPT, or is it one that you manually upload from time to time? Do you have an automated process to anonymize the data, or is that done by hand by staff?
Yeah, it's all right now. It's all manually done. There's no integrations yet.
Mhm.
It's just an Excel file that comes out of our parking database, and we get rid of all confidential data from it, and then we can upload it manually into GPT.
Mhm. I see Alan had a comment in the chat. I wonder if AI could help score RFPs to award a contract, choose the overall best responses based on your scope. I think it could, for sure.
Yeah, I think it could help. My concern would be, have you trained it well enough
True.
to know what you're looking for
Yeah.
and what is important to you, and how does it know that? I think it can help you compare. You might say, I have these, 10 different RFPs, and I ask them all to provide me information on how they do permits and give me a table that tells me what they do for this particular line item. And I bet it could pull in information for that. And that's probably how I would use it. That's kind of a
Mhm.
comparison tool, but I would be cautious about having it score or having it make decisions without me understanding fully how is it coming to that conclusion.
Yeah, totally. I think that's just like to that point, it's a good brainstormer. It's a good like supplementary um thing for that. Or it could be a really
Yeah.
supplementary tool.
And it would be really interesting to go through your scoring process and score it, and then send it through GPT and say, as long as you're not sharing the data with the learning model, and then say, how would you score this? How would you rate it based off of what I've spec'd in the scope of work, and
Yeah.
see if it compares or if there's anything that sticks out that you might have missed.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, another one here. What advice do you have for universities that might struggle with a slower moving culture?
Um, I think you have to have an advocate. You have to have a friend somewhere that can help recognize what you're trying to accomplish, and you have to start really, really small. I would say who is the decision maker of who's the decision maker that will be able to give you permission. And for us, it's typically our OIT, and they have to go through all the online cloud-based stuff.
Yeah.
And so I would have a conversation with them and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, and I think it's possible. This is how I'm going to use it, and this is how I'm going to protect our data, and I'm not going to let the data go to the learning model and all of this. What would it take? I would ask them, what would it take for us to get this? And they might say, well, you've got to do X, you got to do Y, you got to do Z, and all these things. But then you have a list of, all right, I'm looking for a vendor I'm looking for an AI tool that has X and Y and Z. And so I think if you start backwards, if you start at the end with the end in mind and work backwards to say, what would it take for us to get there? I think that would be a really good start.
Super. Totally. One more question here I'll throw at you. Okay, is there an example that you were particularly proud of using AI? Did something save you X amount of hours, helped you navigate a tough situation, besides your what would Greg say?
um, I think two things. I actually also made a GPT for my boss of what would my boss say, and I trained it on what I think he thinks like, and what I think he is important to him, and all the things that he shared with me, and I've trained it on being him, and then I can bounce ideas back and forth, and I can say, this is what I want to say, help me word it in a way that's clear and concise and all those things. So I think that's been helpful, and I use that on a regular basis. But the other thing that I think that we're not doing enough of in the parking world is talking about ourselves. And AI, like, make no mistake, like, we've had a lot of success here lately, because again, we have a tremendous team, and we've had opportunity to do really cool things. But we've been able to take what we do on a regular basis and turn it into a positive story, and be able to very quickly use these tools to create an award nomination. And so as we think about all of our organizations across the country and the world that we're all a part of, and we should all be submitting nominations through that are developed through these tools very quickly to our organizations to help recognize the great work that we're doing locally. And so you could just tell it simply, hey, I created this program of doing X, Y, and Z. Here's the outcome. Here's what it does. Create me an award presentation. Oh, by the way, here's the scoring criteria. And then it creates it for you in a matter of seconds. Refine it over and over again. And then in a matter of an hour, you're done with that award. And then you can then go back and talk about what this, and I can hear my colleagues saying, stop telling them all these secrets.
Forget some inside.
But I think that for those types of things of helping us tell our story, right? If we don't tell our story, then somebody else is going to tell it for us. And I think it's a really easy way for us to say, here's all of the things you need to know about our department. This is what we do. This is how we do it. And then train it, and then just let it go and let it tell your story, and have that context and background. And it's a really cool thing. So we've done that. It helps us with our department resume that we create and keep log of. And so it's very easy for us to talk about ourselves when we have those types of tools.
Okay, I'm gonna throw one last question at you from the Q&A. How do you balance like the automation with the human element? Are there things you think should stay manual?
That's a great question. I think that there are going to be things that need to stay manual. I don't know what those are yet. Right now, all of our stuff, for the most part, is still pretty manual. We haven't eliminated anybody's job duties. That way, we've just sped the work up. But I think as time goes on, there will be lots of things that do get replaced by these tools. The podcast was a great example, right? I can take a PDF and I can upload it and I can get a 15-minute podcast. That's a great example of something that's we're not going to have to sit down and do a podcast in the future. Um, but I think there's still that human element that needs to exist, especially as we talk about on a college campus working with students and working with employees or for the greater business world, working with humans. I think there's that emotional connection that we're going to want to have in some capacity. And so I think it'll be really interesting to figure out where that balance is on what needs to be human related and what can be a robot.
Okay, and I completely lied. I have one more. I scrolled and saw one from Brian that I really enjoyed too, and it's kind of along the same theme. He says, I wonder, given a lot of the unknown surrounding the full power and reach of AI over a long timeline, are you at all worried about the access and power that AI is given? And how do you keep control over the AI and its decisions?
I don't worry about it because there are a whole lot of really, really brilliant people who are worrying about that.
Yeah.
And I have uh, enough things to worry about, to think about that, you know, I think that there will be things put in place to prevent some of that. But I think that scenario, from what I hear others in my community talking about who are further ahead than I am and much smarter than I am in terms of this, I mean, that is a lot closer to reality and to today than not. And so those conversations are happening already. And I don't even worry about it.
Yeah. Simple. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it'll all
Easy.
work out. It'll all work
Yeah.
out.
Awesome. Okay, that is all we got for questions for you, as well as, I guess, questions from anyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Another huge shout out to Dr. Greg for joining us today as well. Obviously, I said earlier, you're a very busy man, so thank you for finding some time in your Thursday to be with us. Everyone, I would highly encourage you to follow along on his journey on LinkedIn, where he shares his journey about how he champions AI at UTA and any other work he does. Our Zoom Wizard will pop up a slide here, and it actually has a downloadable takeaways PDF with a summary of everything we chatted about today, as well as just some next steps in case you wanted to kind of get into action with some of this AI chat we're going on with today. But that's all we got for you today. Thanks so much, Greg.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Yes, absolutely.